Well, let's get more from Olivia, who's been at Manchester and heard that speech. Olivia, clearly it's an attempt maybe by Labour to convince voters that they are a viable government in waiting, but no detail. That's expected to be, we believe, later in the year. But of course, as ever, the devil is in the detail, particularly this pledge, if you like, to make us the highest sustained growth in G7. I mean, both the IMF and the Bank of England scratching their heads as to how to make the economy grow.
Yeah, that was a very bold promise, and as you say, there wasn't a huge amount of detail to back it up. He talked quite a few times about not focusing all of that growth in London and the South East and having sort of bottom-up growth in all of the regions, not just growth in the capital and then redistribution elsewhere, a policy which he called disrespectful to communities around the rest of the country. He talked about Brexit. He was questioned on whether Brexit is holding back Britain, how you can grow the economy with Brexit, and he said that Brexit wasn't the only thing, essentially, I'm paraphrasing here, but Brexit isn't the only thing holding the economy back. Well, that's not wonderful news for Brexit voters in places like Manchester and the North generally, who those blue wall seats, who think that Brexit is a viable way to actually reinvigorate the economy and think it's possible to seize the opportunities of Brexit. He didn't mention those opportunities at all. Otherwise, yes, it was a broad and quite vague plan for his mission-led government, a phrase he kept repeating. And the point that he was very keen to reiterate is that he was ready for government. It wasn't so much about his policy or his ideology. It was simply that Labour is competent and it's ready to fix the mess that the Tories have got the country into. That was the basic gist of it. Now, there are a couple of quite interesting omissions there from his missions for government, one of which was housing. He didn't mention housing at all, and of course there are plenty on both sides of the House who feel like the housing crisis is exacerbating all sorts of other problems in the country, and until you fix that housing crisis, the economy will be unable to grow. And the other one was childcare, which he mentioned in passing in a question, but of course one of the key ways that many people, again on both sides of the House, feel that the economy could grow is by making more affordable childcare for ordinary British families. So those were a couple of things which, quite interestingly, he left out, and were quite similar to the things that Rishi Sunak left out in his 5 plans for the economy and Britain last year. In fact, it was pretty hard to see the difference between the two at times.
And of course, he delivered it in shirt sleeves, as we've seen with Rishi Sunak. But let's reflect that we didn't get the pledges set in stone, as we had with Ed Miliband, which became a bit of his epitaph, of course. But reporters actually asking on that very topic what happened to the leadership pledges on nationalisation, of course, when he came into the Labour leadership.
Well, absolutely, and he talked about a great British energy company, but that didn't seem to be the same as nationalisation of energy. In fact, there's a very interesting piece noting that Keir Starmer has now been through 12 different slogans since he first took up the Labour leadership, and a number of those leadership pledges that he made have now been swept under the carpet, if you like. So the most difficult issue for Starmer seemed to be about getting that trust back, about when he was asked, how can we trust you to fulfil these 5 promises, when, of course, you seem to have backtracked on the pledges that you made during the leadership contest. And that feels like a theme which is going to be picked up again and again as we see more of these speeches from Keir Starmer presenting himself as Britain's next Prime Minister.